We're human beings. You can't drink polluted water. I understand that. So for me, as a commissioner, to be somebody that would say, oh, well, we're not really worried about our resources, you're absolutely crazy. I stood up at the Turkey Creek Forum last week and said I'm against the biomass plant coming to Gainesville, even though we don't really have much of a say, because of it's taking down our trees and our resources. I'm not for that. So I would leave that to the experts, but try to, as a commissioner, guide our city manager and the agencies we are working with common sense solutions to making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Mr. Ken.
I think that's a very important question, because our water resources are really the source of life for this community and for all communities. If we don't protect our water, there are some cases like in the Dakotas where the aquifer wasn't protected from uranium mining practices, and they ended up with radioactive aquifer. It's pretty hard to fix that once the problem is made. And people who protested against it when it was happening were shunted aside and said, you know, this industry is bringing in tax revenues and jobs, and you're just standing in the way of progress, and now you have radioactive aquifer. Now, we don't have that problem here, but we do have an aquifer that is the drinking water supply for this whole area, and it's a lot easier to keep it clean than it is to clean it up once it's been polluted. And if you talk to any of the divers who've been diving here for the last 20, 25 years, they will tell you that the water quality down there is not maintaining very well. So the problem is that local government doesn't have a lot to say about that. We have to be a strong advocate for the best protection. We can put more protection in place if we don't just let the water management district determine what happens on a strictly technical level. Here's the permits they need, they've got them, okay, we're okay with that. One of the things we could do with the Walmart site, if it is going to be built, would be to hire Wes Skiles as a consultant for the storm water runoff there. And instead of building a gigantic wastewater drainage basin, you could actually do something that would be more like a park, and that would recycle a lot of the runoff and keep it from just running into a basin. And then because one of the problems we have with that type of thing, you can see out at the the warehouse site, when you have sinkholes opening up in that basin, over time you're going to have a collection of materials that are going to flush into the aquifer if you have a big sinkhole. So we need to try to protect that aquifer.
Thank you. Okay. Now we're going to go, and we should have plenty of time for the questions from the audience. So I'm going to try to mix them up a little bit. And we will start with, let's recycle back. We'll start this one with Mr. Canning. Are you in favor of placing all commission and city manager email messages automatically online like Alachua County does? Mr. Canning.
That's an easy one to answer. I would say yes to that, and I would also say that the city should adopt a public records policy that is based on a best practices evaluation of what is the way that public records can be made available to citizens with the least inconvenience and with the least cost. So I would say one of the things that, besides the email correspondence, financial documents and reports, and all of the records that the city has archived online in digital format, that all it would take is a link basically to provide you access without having to go and make a public records request, without having to wait for the material. Sometimes you're going to a meeting and you want some material. You should be able to go and get that material if it's available. So I think I would like to see that archived. I would also like to see a lot more public records available online.
Thank you. Mr. Bakari.
Just to clarify, are we talking about emails, let's say maybe that happened last week or yesterday, they're automatically up on the website, or is that something that's done 6 months, 3 months? Do you have an answer to that?
No, I do not know. Does anybody know how Alachua County does it? Is it automatic, or is it, I don't know.
Well, let me just do my best to answer this way. I am not for putting emails on the website that would be anything that would be current, and let's say in a 3-month period, and I would have to investigate it, so don't hold me to that, because there are issues that the city manager may have that are that could be legal things that just you don't want out there for everybody to see. Is there transparency? Absolutely, you can get it, but just at a certain time. So I'm hesitant to say yes, throw everything up there on the website. At some point, should it be legal to get or get the record? Absolutely, whatever the law says should be done, and that has to do with Florida records. And I know my opponent, Mr. Canning, knows a lot about Florida records or state laws and records, because currently he has a lawsuit against the city for that. But we'll go into that some other time. But I'd have to look more into that question just to answer. It's a kind of an open-ended question. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to get you the next one, and which is actually a follow-up.
Thank you.
You'll start with this, which is kind of a follow-up to the same one, but it is part of that same idea. Are you in favor of placing all city financial records online for citizens to study?
Yes.
We're in agreement on that.
All right, good. That was one of my questions. Okay. There are concerns about items placed on the consent agenda at city commission meetings which does not allow for citizen input. How would you handle this issue if you are elected? We'll start with Mr. Canning.
Well, this is an area that state law doesn't really address in an absolute way. It's one of those home rule issues that the city is allowed to make rules of procedure for how you conduct your meetings. So we have some leeway there. But you actually aren't required by law to even have an agenda. So it's really up to the citizens to have our needs made known, so that we're not shut out of the process. Otherwise, we can just be spectators and business is conducted and we don't have anything to say at all. I think we have a pretty good system that we have in place right now. The consent agenda is problematic because in the county, for example, if there's the consent, they always have consent agendas, and sometimes they're very large, but no one has ever requested an item to be removed from the consent agenda for discussion and been denied, that I know of. And the consent agenda is voted on separately. So I would say that what I would do in Alachua is I would have, and this was discussed at a recent workshop for the rules of procedure, I would have an opportunity for citizens to remove an item from the consent agenda if it's controversial and they feel there are questions to be answered and needs to be discussed. And I think that opportunity should be granted, and those items should be removed. There's reasonable rules that you have to follow. You can't just say someone could say I want all the items removed from the consent agenda and then not show up. So I'm not advocating for just an open, free for all. I'm just saying that there has to be a procedure. That there have been, I have had many items on the consent agenda that I've asked to be removed that the commission refused to remove them. So I think that's a problem and needs to be addressed.
Can you ask that question again, please?
Yes, sure. There are concerns about items placed on the consent agenda at city commission meetings, which then does not allow for citizen input. How would you handle this issue if you are elected?
I think the consent agenda has its purpose, and I believe all citizens, of course, have their 3 minutes at the beginning or end of the meeting, depending on if they speak at the beginning or the end of the meeting, to speak on issues. The consent agenda helps the meeting move, helps regular city business move forward. And let's get to more of the pressing issues. I think if a citizen, as a commissioner, if a citizen has an issue with an item on the agenda and would like to pull it off or ask me to pull it off as a commissioner, I would like to at least try to entertain that thought if I deem it's reasonable. So how you handle the consent agenda, I won't say I'm confused, but here's the deal. I want to work with people. I want to work with citizens. If you have an issue, let's talk about it. What are we trying to do? What I'm not for is going out there and requesting 10 million public records and keeping city staff from doing what they're supposed to be doing. I'm not for holding up city business. And I think that question comes from the recent remarks about the consent agenda from